Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Leeson Learned. Thank you so much for being here. I am very, very excited about today's guest. This gentleman was one of the UK's top stand-up comedians. He was the comedy editor for GQ magazine. A few years ago, he decided to leave that life and move to New Brunswick, Canada, of all places. And if you're thinking, why the fuck would anyone do that? Great question, and I think it might be the first one I ask him in a moment. He has been on CBC. He's toured across the country. He's toured across multiple countries. And he also sold out an arena. What? A fucking arena. This guy sold out an arena twice now in St. John, New Brunswick, and he beat Jerry Seinfeld's attendance record in the process. I cannot believe it. I discovered this guy a few years ago. Not I discovered him, but I became aware of him a few years ago and was like, who the fuck is this British guy that is selling out arenas in New Brunswick? Well, he's not. He sold out one, but he did it twice. He's got comedy specials. He's got a YouTube channel. They even made a movie about his life. That's how fucking fascinating he is. And I know you're going to love him. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. James Mullinger. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate this.
Not at all. It's an honor. It's an honor to be on the Jeff Leeson show. This is where else would I want to be on a Friday? This is it.
Well, I appreciate that, and I became aware of you a couple years ago. I heard about this British guy that sold out an arena in New Brunswick, which I first thought was a joke. I literally thought it was like The Onion or one of those like fake news newspapers or something. I was like, there's no way somebody is selling out an arena in New Brunswick that I've never heard of. And, then kind of looked into you, realized, holy shit, this guy really did that. And then kind of learned a little bit more about you and became an instant fan. So this is a really big deal for me, honestly.
Well, that's very kind. I of course know of you extremely well, and it's nice to finally connect. I hear we have many mutual friends. I hear wonderful things about you from so many people. So this is lovely. This is great. One of those wonderful benefits of the world we're living in now is things like this can happen, and we can make connections that we maybe wouldn't have done if it wasn't for a global pandemic. So yay, COVID!
yeah. There's always a silver lining to everything. It seems.
That's right. Yeah, we have to find it anyway. Yeah.
So you are, of course, from London, England.
Yeah.
And I am from the Canadian version, London, Ontario, the one that ripped you guys off.
Nice.
And then you moved from London, England to St. John, New Brunswick, and to steal a line from one of your comedy specials. Why the fuck did you do that?
Good question. The short answer is quality of life. My wife grew up here, and we'd spent many years together living in London. Obviously had London a great place to visit, a great place to grow up, a great place to be in your 20s, but we started having kids in our 30s, and really it was just reaching that kind of point in our lives and careers where we said, we are living in the most expensive city in the world, one of the most crime-ridden cities. We're not doing any of the London things, and yet we're paying all this money to be here. And we kind of figured that we were at a stage in our lives that we could, in theory, do the jobs that we do anywhere. Obviously, New Brunswick not known for being a hub of media or entertainment or any of those things, but so adamant were we that we wanted to give our children this kind of rural, community-driven upbringing that I was fully prepared to give up any type of creative role in my life in order to live here. Like, that's kind of how much. So coming here in 2014, so almost 7 years ago now, was a decision based on it was basically the first time in my life that I kind of put like ego and career and ambition aside and said what is the right thing for my kids, and that's a very rare thing for me to do, to put anything at all ahead of comedy career or anything else. And
right.
So everything that's kind of happened since then, and the fact that I'm still able to, I mean, even now with what's going on in the world, make any form of living at this, it's all been a surprise.
So when you moved to New Brunswick, you had obviously been doing stand up and entertainment in England, in London, right?
So I had I had both a day job working for GQ magazine, where I was the comedy editor, and yes, performed stand up nightly. So it was kind of a ridiculously frenetic schedule, which was again part of the reason why we had no quality of life, where essentially I'm working all day and every night and still had no money left to pay for childcare.
Right. Right. Wow. And so when you moved to New Brunswick and made that like full move there, were you fully expecting that the comedy career is over, or did you think it's just like I'm starting over fresh, or were you expecting a completely different career?
Good question. I guess I was somewhat hopeful that I would be able to make something of a stab of it, and possibly it was kind of dumb arrogance or dumb hopefulness that I kind of thought. I mean, now often in keynote speeches and stuff, I talk about this whole kind of idea of like how absurd it is actually that people would say to me. People would, after saying, "Why did you move here?" the second thing they would say is, "What do you do for a living?" And when I said comedian, they'd be like, "Oh, you can't do that here. There's no comedy industry here. We don't have comedy clubs in New Brunswick." And now with the benefit of hindsight, I'm able to kind of point out the lunacy of that, because you wouldn't say to a plumber, "Don't go to a particular town, there's no plumbers there." If there's no plumbers, there's a lot of shitty toilets that need unblocking. So I see myself as the toilet unblocker of comedy. And
I hope that's on your website.
Yeah, it should be. But I guess with hindsight, it's easy for me to say that. But at the time, there was definitely an element that I kind of thought maybe I can, because I've always had this kind of DIY approach to things. Like because in the UK, any profile I had, which was minimal, but any profile I had was all self-generated. I was never one of these people who was the darling of the industry, who got signed up by an agent. The industry was essentially telling me that I didn't have any of those things. I didn't get booked for the panel shows in the UK. I didn't have the trendy agent. I forged out creating an audience for myself by grafting, by booking tours myself, deciding that I wanted to go on solo tours and building an audience this organic way. Of course, in England being such a tiny island, easier to do, because all you have to do, I would get on trains and literally go to a town, walk into a theatre, negotiate the rental with them, get posters printed, go back to the town, introduce myself at little shops and businesses and sell bulk tickets to a company, go to a post office and speak to the manager and ask them to put the poster up and tell them to spread the word. So it was always kind of so essentially my whole comedy life was always like a fringe. I treated 12 months of the year like a fringe. So I kind of knew that I had that approach and that maybe that approach could work here, and that's basically what I did when I got here. Was took every single gig I possibly could. So came here, and if there was an opportunity to perform in a school, a church, in a field, in a vineyard, just said yes to everything and treated it the same way that a contractor would treat their business, which is, and this is the wonderful thing about a small place, of course, is that word spreads quickly if you're good or bad at something. And that's the weird thing in, so I was very much aware that if I had a bad gig, everyone would hear about it. But conversely, you have a good one, the word spreads very quickly. So it was a very grassroots, organic approach of do a show, people hear about it, as opposed to the traditional system of, you get signed by an agent who then negotiates with a late night, booker that, they get to have their you can have my big name client as a guest if you put on my new up and coming act for a stand up set. All of those kind of backhanded deals that go on in bigger industry hubs. None of that's the case here, and I think it's one of those things where, had I been the kind of comic that maybe wants to kind of wait for the agent to book the shows for them, obviously that wouldn't have worked here. All of that said, I mean, the first thing I did, my first day here, when we moved here, I did spend a week in Toronto, like auditioning for Yuck Yucks and all of those things, and that was what I had in my head was going to be the way in, was being able to work for Yucks and do that across the country. Now that was and is certainly part of my revenue in normal times, but I didn't expect it to be like the tiniest part of it.
That's really amazing. First of all, of you to do that, and I think that's probably maybe a little bit more common now out of necessity for a lot of comedians. But for years and years, I think the majority of comedian mindsets was wait until you get the comedy festival, do the open mics as much as you can, wait for someone like Yuck Yucks to sign you, wait for an agent to sign you, almost wait for somebody to discover you. And now we're seeing that the industry is the complete opposite of that at this point.
That's beautifully put, and you're absolutely right. And funny enough, it was actually Catherine Ryan who told me this a few days in. I remember texting her because I'd basically I obviously knew that famous story about how she walked out of working at Hooters one night and went to Toronto Yucks and did her first open spot, and I was there auditioning that for Mark Breslin in my first week, and I sent her a picture, and she, like I'm here, I'm doing this thing at the club where you started, and she replied kind of saying, that's great, but just remember that the independent scene in Canada is huge, and this is the amazing thing that this country, the amazing thing that has been created by Canadian comedians is that because there are no riches at the end of the rainbow for us here, because there is no because that's been eliminated. Like, everyone knows that when you get into comedy in Canada, unless you are moving to England or America, you're not going to become a millionaire. So what I love about it is that it means that the passion and the craft and the artistry behind Canadian comedians is so pure, because everyone doing comedy in Canada really loves stand-up, really loves the craft, is really passionate about it, and that's why Canadian comedy is the best in the world, because there's no fucking money at the end of it, right? So there's no one doing it for ruthless reasons,
Right.
and all of those kind of people. And again, that's not to disparage all American performers, or indeed British ones, but because there is those spoils at the end, it becomes a very ruthless thing in those other countries. Whereas in Canada, the one thing, and it's what I love about, I basically know if I'm in a dressing room in a comedy club in Canada, the one thing I will have in common with all of the other performers on the bill that night is a passion for stand up, and whereas that isn't necessarily the case in other countries.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that's very accurate, and definitely the case in somewhere like Toronto, because you see these guys that were back when it was allowed, where they were out, night after night, no money, no pay, sometimes 4 or 5 shows a night, just to get stage time, just to get better, and just for the passion of it. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I think there's a lot of comedians that sort of settle in Canada, at least, kind of settle for just being an amateur, or just kind of having it be a hobby, because they don't know the other side, or they don't learn the business side, or they're not willing to to put in that hustle that you're talking about, doing your own shows. And certainly, for a lot of people here, the idea of even just renting a venue is so daunting, because it costs money, and how am I going to fill it, and nobody knows who I am. And so yeah, again, I think I think people can learn a lot from your hustle and kind of that mindset. And I think that's the people right now, certainly, that are making it in the industry.
Right, and yeah, it's a very interesting. I mean, as you say, like if you want to understanding and embracing the business side is just so necessary here, And I mean, for my part, I probably spend more time at a desk than I did when I had a desk job.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
In normal times, I mean, just between admin and paperwork and booking and then promoting the shows. And again, there's so many independent producers across the country. Like, I mean, I was just swapping messages with Rob at Trainwreck in British Columbia, and I did shows with him last year or year before last, and then obviously last year's got postponed to this year, and of course now they're going to be postponed again. But it's all of these kind of independent producers that are kind of making these waves in entertainment, and basically just trusting the audiences. If they know that there's a performer coming to town, they don't need for that performer to be some big TV name. They don't need to. They just need to trust that promoter that this person is going to make them laugh their asses off. And there's a wonderful trust amongst audiences here for that reason. But yeah, to your point, I mean, the business side of it is such a huge thing, because not everyone necessarily can get or indeed want an agent, but also, I mean, that's a lot of handing over a huge percentage of your income to someone else is also a consideration, of course, as well.
What would you say the biggest difference is between doing stand-up in England and doing stand-up here in Canada?
Definitely the audiences, in terms of the. And actually, Mark Breslin did sum this up beautifully when that exact night, that first night that I was here, that first week when I was here as a Canadian resident, an audition, and I basically was brought on stage, and I ran out and was like bang 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 bang, like kind of really fast and kind of, and afterwards he was like I know why you do that, and he said it's because in England the audiences, it's like a baying mob. Like, I mean, I guess, and to summarize, I'll summarize a bit. The difference is in Canada, as weird as it sounds, comedy audiences come out to laugh. In Britain, it often feels like the audience is coming out just to ruin the comedian's night. Now, of course, this is, I'm not, and I can't generalize with all, but there was a lot of clubs and a lot of club chains where you would literally feel that anger, like you really, and of course that makes it a great place to learn and a great place to kind of, because you're walking out on stage not to a friendly audience going, oh, that's great, there's a comedian, let's have some fun. It's people sitting there going, let's see if this bastard can make me laugh. like that's the attitude they have. So the point that Breslin had made to me was he was like you don't need to rush here. He's like, get out there, take your time. Like you they are not against you, they are not your enemy. You can ease into it. It doesn't. Whereas in England there is this feeling of like, if I don't get 3 massive laughs in the first 25 seconds, they're going to boo me off. Now, of course, that is an amazing discipline, and of course it's why so many comedians, when they move to the UK, kind of improve so quickly, because of that. But how, for me, I mean, what a joy to kind of have to, and again, I mean, a horrible, many years of deaths and being booed off and learning, but to come here and for it to not feel like a battle when you walk out on stage is just a joy, and I love that. And again, I mean, that's a Canadian, of course the stereotype of friendly Canadians is true, and that is what translates into the audiences, that they are there. Again, it just sounds weird to say it, but yeah, they've gone to a comedy show because they actually do want to laugh. That's the biggest difference.
Do you notice a difference, even just in Canada? Do you notice a difference between the major big cities and small towns, and the difference in those crowds?
Good question. Not so much. I mean, I guess not massively. I find, and I'm thinking back to like when I played Toronto Yucks. I mean, one of the most daunting things when I come and do Toronto Yucks is, of course, the bills on a Saturday night are so stacked that if I'm closing and before my 45-minute set, they've got like 6 absolute killers, like doing their tightest Montreal 7 minutes, bang bang bang. It's daunting, and partly why I would always enjoy coming to do Toronto Yucks was because it would really push me to be on my A game, because I'd be sat at the back of the room watching 4 or 5 comedians absolutely destroy with the tightest, like, as I say, Montreal gala sets, or their, bang 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 back to back, and it would really force me to bring something. So that's one of the differences I feel when I do clubs in bigger cities. But in terms of the audiences, I don't necessarily feel that there's arguably you can possibly be more politically incorrect in rural towns, of course, and be less, there's one line that I had where, just a throwaway comment, but basically I would always offer the audience, it's just one of those stupid tricks that we put as comedians, but I would basically offer the audience, do you want the clean ending or the dirty ending? And of course, as if an audience is ever gonna ask for the clean ending. But invariably, whenever I would say this, I would say 50% of the time, someone would shout out, I like it dirty. It was almost like a feed. Like, I knew someone was going to shout this, and I used to do this thing. Whenever someone did this, I would say #me too, and it always got a laugh. And then I did it one night at Toronto Yucks, and it was, this particular show was a very young audience of 20 somethings. I say very young. I say that because I guess that's very quickly, in brackets, one of the biggest differences is definitely age demographic, because in the Maritimes, the average age of my audience, I would say, is the average age would be 50s or 60s, and that's average. So there's some people bringing it down a bit, but no one in their 20s comes to see comes to see my shows here. Whereas anyway, so I said this line, someone shouted, I like it dirty. I said #me too, and a lot of people booed, as if it was this kind of like millennial, like, that, how dare you undermine our movement, it was that kind of mindset. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. Like, this is a throwaway comment. It's kind of, I'm also not. It's not like I'm laying into the Me Too movement. I'm just, It's in some ways just a kind of a play on words, but they took umbrage with it, and I just thought, well, that would never happen in a small town or in a rural place. But that was one thing. But equally, I think it could also have been an age thing, where as we know, the 20-somethings are very protective of everything.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. The age thing is huge. And I notice that in the smaller towns, it's typically an older age group that comes out to the shows. And in the bigger cities, there's often at comedy clubs a younger age group. And I have found that the younger people are almost come just waiting for them to hear something they can be offended by or pissed off at, or something they can come up to you after and be like, what the hell was that?
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. They are kind of how they are. And again, I don't want to generalize and say all 20-somethings, but basically you see it on Twitter where this kind of, and it just seems, it's such an interesting time, because of course, we're all people who understand the reasons why political correctness was a good thing, in terms of the fact that we're trying to stamp out the racism and homophobia and misogyny that our parents espoused so frequently at the dinner table, and we're all on board with that, and we're all very happy about that. But then it's funny how essentially what's happening now is it's a completely different thing of just like be mad about everything.
Right.
And which it's hard to understand.
Yeah, very difficult. I want to take it back to when you first started in England. Can you give me a really solid hell gig or hell story, or one of the best sort of heckle / boot off stage moments you've experienced there?
I certainly can. I mean, obviously there's many to choose from, but the one that really stands out And this actually does involve Canadian comedian Sean Collins, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And this is actually, this is quite funny because right now it's a year ago today. Actually, I last saw Sean. We were both doing Ottawa Yuck Yucks this weekend a year ago. Of course, I mean, such a weird thing to think that at that point, however many 200 people packed into a tiny room. None of us had even heard the word COVID. Masks weren't a thing. I mean, it's just weird how much then changed in the subsequent 2 months. But yeah, I mean, one of the. I mean, I had many gigs where I obviously thought about giving up, and it is a weird thing. I'm sure you get this as well, where you kind of look back at those early years, and you're like. And the other thing is, I mean, I remember a lot of people that started out the same time as me who were significantly better, significantly funnier, but who just were put off by the nightmare gigs and gave up. And I always kind of think, what is it about people like us that forged through and for whatever reason, we're able to cope with the crushing disappointments and the misery that we thought, I want to, I mean, I guess it's a masochistic thing where we're like, I want more of this.
Yeah.
And then also, I mean, I guess it's also that thing about, the ego of performers that, like, even though audiences were telling us that they didn't want us to by not laughing and booing us off, the fact that we crave attention so much that we are willing to go through that just for the rare night where it went well, and it's just it fascinates me as a concept. But the one where I cannot believe that I kept going was I'd been maybe going for about 3 years and managed to secure a 10-minute open spot at the Comedy Store on a Saturday night, which was like the holy grail of open spots. I'd done a competition there, and I'd been in the final of a competition there, which then had got me a Thursday night open spot. And of course, I mean, the crazy thing with English open mic nights was once you decided you wanted to do stand-up, and you would write to a comedy club to get on the waiting list to do a set, it was like 10 months away. Like it was, so it would take literally. I mean, the waiting list would just. So anyway, you would do well at the store on a Thursday, and then you would wait 6 months, and you would get to do a Friday. So I got this holy grail. It was the early show, a Saturday night. Now she was my wife at this point. We'd been married for maybe 2 years, and she basically hadn't seen me for 6 months because I would work all day, and then every night I would get on a train and travel to somewhere across the UK to do a show, sleep on a train platform for the night, come back. I mean, and it's a weird thing when you tell your partner and your new wife that basically, hey, we don't see much of each other right now. Well, I'm gonna take up stand-up comedy. So not only are we not going to see each other in the evenings anymore, you won't see me at weekends either. And she goes, oh, well, at least we'll have a bit more money. No, we're going to have a lot less money because I'm not going to be paid a cent for at least 5 years. So any money we do have, or anything that's left in the overdraft, is going to be spent by me taking a £50 train to the middle of nowhere to die on my ass, and then spend any money's going on cabs, train fares. And then when you do see me once a month, I'm going to be so depressed because I'm going to have been booed off stage for the previous night. It's a weird thing to say to people.
Do you take this man to be your love?
Exactly right.
Wow.
And then so I get this holy grail of the Saturday night open spot, and so I say to her, look, you haven't seen me perform in about a year. You've barely seen me in 6 months. I'm like, come and see. You can see where this is headed. Come and see how great I've got, how much I've improved as a comic, and I you know what else? I mean, this night, because if you do well on a Saturday night, there's a chance you could get booked for the week as a Comedy Store comedian. So I also had it in my head that to get booked for a weekend, it would be like £800, so like $1,600. So basically, if this went well, I did get booked, this was going to be my I'm giving up my day job moment. So there was so much riding on this. Anyway, wow. I arrive at the I don't even need to finish the story, do I?
Yeah.
And so we get to the club, and I'm all excited, and I've got this set, which again I've been done 1,000 times. It wasn't like I was testing something different. Anyway, I go into the dressing room. It's full of, as the Comedy Store always is, it's like back-to-back killers. Like, it's like, because they don't do headliners and so forth in England. It's basically 4 headliners. So it was Sean Collins, his mate Mike Gunn, I think Phil Nicol was there. It's 4 of the biggest comedians in the UK that I've watched a million times. I'm in the dressing room. Long story short, they bring me out on stage. The MC, whose name is Mickey Hutton, he gave me a lovely intro, brought me out. I don't know what went wrong, right? But I put it down to my excitement and nerves and inexperience was such that I came out trying to mask my nerves with enthusiasm, which, as we know, audiences can smell that inexperience and that like shit on a toothbrush, and they smelled it. And then I also got thrown slightly because I, as I often do, was watching the show carefully, had seen some women in the front row that had been spoken to, had some funny things that I knew I could come out and say to them that would then lead into my first joke. Anyway, I come out, they're not there, so I'm thrown by that. And I'm really over the top, like trying to, and they're not, no one loves anything. It's just going appallingly. About 7 minutes in, someone shouts, "You unfunny cunt." And, and then the rest of the room join in, and it's like they are chanting, like 400 people chanting, "Unfunny cunt, unfunny." And of course, you never go over and you never go under. But I'm 7 minutes, and I'm up there thinking, I think the club would agree I should get off. So I walk off the stage, and in the dressing room, all the comics who had been so nice to me beforehand are literally, they won't make eye contact with me. And they're actually edging away from me like my unfunniness is contagious. Right. Like as if I've got the COVID, the COVID of unfunniness. The unfunny gene might rub off on them. And they just were, and there's also a kind of, an anger that they're emitting, which is kind of like, how dare you think you can do what we do, right? Right, and how dare you come into this sacred haven of comedy and also ruin that audience's night? There was that kind of rage, and so I sheepishly walked through the dressing room and into the audience, and my wife was sat on the end of the row, having witnessed this, obviously thinking, what the fuck have you been doing for the last 6 months? Like, because you know what it's like also for non-comedians or comedians, you know what it's like when you see someone bomb. You cannot imagine how they could ever do well. And similarly, when you see someone do well, you can't imagine them ever bombing. Like Absolutely. I've had this, experience where people have seen me and then come to see me another night, basically with, for the most part, the same or similar act. And they've seen me do well, like rip the roof off one night, and then they bring people, and then I bomb, and they're like, what happened? And I'm like, I don't know. Right. And it's often hard to put your finger on what that thing is, but it's hard. Anyway, so she's obviously thinking that is just terrible. And of course, that act had gone perfectly well the night before somewhere else. Right. Anyway, I go up to her and I say, we should go. We should get out. Like 400 people in this room hate me, and she goes, "Yeah, we should, but can we leave separately? Like, can you go out first?" Like, she didn't want to be seen with me, like that. Wow.
And she's your wife, right?
My wife, and she did not want to be seen leaving with the loser that had ruined everyone's night. So that was
so smart.
That was one of the, and I guess to the point about why gigs go bad. Another experience, and I will try and keep it much briefer, but another experience I had was at a club chain in England called the Glee Club, which is pretty much the best club chain. There were other club chains. Comedy Store is the most famous one. Jongleurs was known as kind of the most bear pit, kind of hen-do audience, having fights. But the Glee Club chain was kind of known as the nicest chain in that they loved comedians. They wouldn't allow hen parties to come in. There was a maximum number of bookings. They would literally be telling audience members to be quiet. And most importantly,
what's a hen party?
Oh, sorry, like a stagette party. Is that what it's called? Like a
bachelorette, like a bachelorette.
Exactly. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So they wouldn't encourage those because they know that they would ruin gigs.
Yeah.
So they were, and to the extent that they even had like Phil Nicol help design the club. It was like, where should the bar be? How high should the stage be? Where it was the Comedians Club, the Glee chain, and I got booked for my first ever weekend there, like paid weekend. This was a few years later. Long story short, I turn up on the first night, the Friday night. I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I'm tired. I've spent a whole week working in an office. I've ran out of work, like basically pretended I was going to the toilet and then grabbed my bag and left the office so I could get the train to the Midlands. I've arrived at this club exhausted, tired, nervous. My first paid weekend. Long story short, I go out and have just this killer electric set. Like, just everything was perfect. I actually found a diary entry recently that I wrote the next day from the Holiday Inn in Birmingham, where and I was like, this was the day after this, and I've basically written saying, this is the first time I've ever thought that I could ever see myself playing like an arena, the first time I've ever felt like a comedian, that I could actually do this. Walked around on a high all day. The Saturday night, turn up at the club, packed again, same room, same lineup, same intro, same everything. Walked out, died on my ass, like absolute, like total fucking death. And what was the difference? Every joke was the same, and I think partly what it was, as we know, I mean, the intricacies of those first few seconds on stage. I think possibly on the Friday night I walked out with the right mix of vulnerability and nerves, but knowing what I was doing. I don't know what it was, but there was something about my demeanor that subconsciously, when I pulled the mic out of the stand, the whole room went, oh, we like the look of this guy. We're subconsciously, obviously not consciously, I think, we're going to see what this guy has to say. But right. I think on the Saturday, I must have walked out with an air of arrogance that again, subconsciously, they all thought, fuck this guy.
Yeah.
And it's just that interesting thing. And sorry, one part of the story that I missed actually for the Comedy Store point was that as I walked out of the room with separately from my wife that night, Sean Collins was brought onto the stage. So the MC comes back on and rightly tears strips off me, because again, he told the audience, you're going to love this next comedian, and they didn't. So he needs them to trust him again. So right. He has to tear strips off me. So as I'm walking out separately from my wife, he is laying into me, and he introduced Sean Collins. Now Sean Collins walks out on the stage, and he's always very kind of slow and deliberate and precise when he walks out and doesn't rush anything. But I think on this particular occasion, almost to kind of highlight the gulf of difference between him and this loser, me, who had just ran out and kind of tried to win them over with, false enthusiasm. He came out and he pulled the stool over, he sat down, he sipped his beer, he looked at the crowd, and he just owned it. And it was just fascinating to me to see that difference between, me thinking that running out going, hey, well, hey, well, hey, well, like a game show host. The audience saw that in experience and hated it, whereas he just owned the room. And it was interesting. Basically tonight, a year ago, at 3 a.m. in a hotel bar, after a dozen whiskeys, telling Sean this story that it's stuck with me for like a decade that had happened that night.
Wow, that is one of the best heckling stories I've heard, where even your wife is like, I can't be seen with you.
Yeah, I know, right?
This episode of Leeson Learned is sponsored by the Big Fish Steak and Lounge in Sarnia, Ontario. One of my personal favorite restaurants in the world. I was going to say in the country, but no, in the world. They have some of the greatest food I have ever had. Every single time I eat there, I think to myself, it will never get better than what I have just eaten. And the next time I go back, they top it once again. It's that good. If you live in the Sarnia area, make sure you book your reservation for lunch or dinner, or hell, book your reservation for both right now. Do it tonight. What are you going to cook for dinner tonight? Probably something awful. Don't do that. Head on over to the Big Fish Steak and Lounge. If you don't live in Sarnia, I suggest you make a trip down just for the food, or if you're going to be in the area, stop in and have one of the greatest meals you will ever have. This episode is also sponsored by the Car Lot Etc. in Sudbury, Ontario, where they make buying your next vehicle very, very easy. Let's say you go online, you find a vehicle that you want to test drive, but you can't quite make it in. No problem at all. They will bring the vehicle to you so you can take that test drive right from your own home. They do have the largest used truck inventory in the north. They also have the best selection of cars, SUVs, and vans. If you're like me and your credit is, let's say, not great, that's no problem. They do have options for everyone. You can also trade in your vehicle. They offer the best trade-in value in the north. So head on over to the website, thecarlot.ca, and book a test drive right now. This episode of Leeson Learned is sponsored by Cookum's Secret and G's Carpet Cleaning and Services. For all your cleaning needs, contact G's Carpet Cleaning and Services. And for your personal well-being, contact Cookum's Secret Sonotherapy with Drumming at G2cleaningservice.com. I got a chance to actually go up to Timmins and take part in the sonotherapy and the drumming. It was extremely relaxing. I recommend it highly. Head on over to G2cleaningservice.com and book your time today, and make sure you get some cleaning done while you're there. When you moved to Canada, how long between coming here and starting to live here before, and then selling out the arena? How long was that for you?
Weirdly, it sounds absolutely insane now to say it, 2 years.
Wow.
And
Wow.
So it was weird. Like, so I moved here in February of 2014. Kind of hit the ground running in terms of went out and was doing shows, as I mentioned, everywhere I possibly could. And mentioned to someone that my dream was to play the Imperial Theatre in St. John, which is an 800-seater. It's like a beautiful historic theatre.
And that's where the first special is from, right?
Well, it is on YouTube. It's called Londoner to Maritimer.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, in fact, so I actually did it first time in 2014, and that was weird because I basically put a 800-seater on sale. Or I said to someone I want to do it sometime, and they said do it now, and I'm like that's ludicrous. They're like just do it now. So so that was the October of the year I moved there. So I moved in February.
Wow.
And I booked and I basically again did the fringe approach and that was a fairly hard push in that it was me going around postering, emailing people, literally writing to any email I could get saying hello. I don't know if you've heard of me, but I've just moved here and I'm a comedian. I'm doing this show, and my plan was to do the show I'd been touring the UK with before I left. But then, of course, within that 6 months, ended up with a whole new 90 minutes about here. So did that in that year, then booked that same theatre again for the exact same date the following year. So then did it in October 2018, sold it out again. And then around that time, a film production company within St. John called Hemmings House had got in touch saying that basically, CBC have this money for documentaries, for making documentaries about, and they have to do regional ones. Anyway, someone from CBC had got in touch with them and said, is there anything happening in St. John that we could do a documentary about? And they said, well, this comedian's moved here, really likes it. How about we do a documentary about the revitalization of St. John through his eyes? And it was supposed to be me interviewing people and so forth. And it was that. But we sat down and said, let's have a hook. We need a hook for this documentary. Like, otherwise it's just, there's no point to it. So someone in their office suggested, why don't you try and sell out Harbour Station, which is the 5,000-seater arena that traditionally Seinfeld and Jeff Dunham would play. And I'd already kind of had it in my head, like that was something that I was going to attempt at some point. And I kind of thought, well, what perfect timing to do this, because we can really mobilize the city. So that's the thing with this whole, and of course, I mean, I've always been happy to, laugh about and joke about the whole selling out the arena thing. But I mean, obviously there's so many stipulations to it. It wasn't like I sold it. I didn't sell it out like Seinfeld sells it out. There was obviously lots of comp tickets, lots of tickets donated to charities that they were then able to sell. I did sponsorship deals with, for example, Lexus of St. John. I was able to, they would sponsor it for a large amount. So I had this kind of capital up front, and then they would get a huge proportion of tickets to give away when people bought cars. It was all these kind of different ways of doing it. But the thing I knew was, by having this CBC documentary, it meant that we were able to go out to the city and say, the rest of Canada is going to see this film about this lunatic coming to this small place and trying to pull off this thing. And the city got behind it like you wouldn't believe, because, of course, they were aware that how shit would it look if this documentary went out and it was like, mad Englishman moves to St. John, tries to do a thing, and it completely fails, and no one comes. And the message is, don't go to St. John, nothing, you won't be. So...
and his wife left separately from the arena.
His wife was the only person to come, but even then, she wasn't willing to be seen with him. So it really was that small, and this is one of the things that I still can't get over, is the support of this city, and the kind of, just the gratitude that people had for someone coming in. And I see it. I see the city, and I see this in small cities across Canada all the time. But the way in which someone comes and they get behind people, and it's such a different way of thinking to, like, in England, where, and again, I mean, this is a Canadian thing, full stop, but like how, when in England, politicians get votes by arguing against immigration and saying we're going to throw out every immigrant. And it's that kind of Donald Trump, approach of hatred of immigrants. And the same week that the British Prime Minister was trying to run for re-election or whatever by saying we're going to throw out all the immigrants. Meanwhile, Justin Trudeau's here he's getting votes by embracing Syrian refugees coming here. Like, it's just the polar opposite. So it's that kind of mindset here of, like, being happy when people come here, that was to so that first time selling out the arena was that. And then basically I thought, well, I don't want this to be a one-off, so I then booked it so I only had 5 months or so to do it that first time, but like I say, I had the whole city on side to do it. I then booked it for 2 years. Again, I'm superstitious about dates, so I then booked it 2 years to the day afterwards, and then basically had over a year to push and sell and sell those tickets to fill it a second time. And who knows when that'll ever be allowed to ever again. With social distancing, you're probably only allowed to have 100 people in a 5,000-seater arena now.
Yeah, wow. And so how many tickets did you guys end up or I guess not necessarily sold, because you said there were a few comps and stuff, but how many people were actually in that arena the first time, and then how many the second time?
It was close. So it was about 4,800 the first time, and then closer to 5,000 the second time.
Wow.
So and then so it's one of those things. I mean, just trying to get that number of people in a city with a population of 100,000 in a room anyway is hard. Let alone when. But it was, and both those experiences will definitely go down as, I kind of said this in the CBC documentary, like, a day won't go by without me thinking about that. And it's true, like, in actual fact, and I often use, like, looking at when I'm on the road, and when I'm, you know what it's like when you're getting ready to, so we don't always feel gig ready, and quite often, especially when you've had a bad show the night before, and you're trying to get into the mindset of the stage version of you, where you can actually walk out with that confidence. Quite often I'll just sit and watch, like, before I'm going to go out, if I'm feeling like I'm a terrible comedian. I'm going to get found out tonight. This is going to be. I'll kind of just quickly go on YouTube and just quickly watch like a 5,000 person standing ovation, and go, okay, and that gives me so the whole experience gives me it boosts me when I need it now.
When you were getting set to do the first arena show, you must have done tons of shows obviously leading up, but nothing probably of that size, right? It wasn't like you were doing arenas all over to prepare for that size.
Good point. Yeah. And I think the night before, actually, I did 3 gigs, and one of them, annoyingly, I was hosting. It was booked like a year before. I was basically hosting a big cable systems awards gala, but needed obviously to do. So I was like, look, can I do some stand up? And also, can you extend the salad portion of the evening when they have their starter, so I can run to Yuck Yucks and do a set in between, because I've got this gig. So I did actually run around doing. But yes, to your point, I mean, I'd never played anything over 1,000-seater before, and there was a quote. It was lucky enough to interview Jerry Seinfeld once, and I asked him, because he was coming to England at this point to play the O2 Arena, which is a 20,000-seater arena. And I remember asking him, like, how he plays it differently in those rooms. And he kind of said that the important thing is to not do that. And he quoted a time that him and Stephen Wright in the 80s had played an 80,000-seater stadium. Wow. And he said, with stand-up, it's like, he used this line, which is brilliant. He said that basically, stand up, it's kind of like swimming. It doesn't matter how deep the water is. All you can do is swim, and which is interesting. But the thing that I found, and it was interesting. So Nikki Payne opened for me that first time. So she came off, and I was like, "What's it like? Like what?" And she said, "What's weird is you think you're not going to be able to see anything, but she said, I can see everyone." Like, so that was good to know, because I was kind of expecting a theatre style situation where you walk up and you can't really see. She was like, I can see everyone at the back balconies, I can see everything. But I think one of the things I learned the first time, so that was the thing, so I had it in my head, I just need to go out and do the act the same as I would anywhere else. It would be a mistake to try and play it up. The trick that I learned the first time that I then really utilized the second time was that, if anything, because I am quite big when I'm on the stage in terms of, I mean, not in the same way I was that night at the Comedy Store when I was trying to, hey, but in smaller rooms I can be quite manic. And what I tried to do the second time was actually dial it down, so it became a lot more conspiratorial. And I mean, this is a technique also that I've kind of stolen, copied from a comedian I love in England called Frank Skinner, who in the 90s was just and it still is basically my favorite stand-up comedian. And he was a big TV name, but he would do these tours, and these shows were absolutely filthy. And he was like the first comedian I ever saw doing routines about like discovering that masturbating with a finger up his ass felt nice, and how he had to stop because he was worried he was going to have a heart attack, and his mum would find him, and it'd be like, how are we going to get the finger out? And he would do these, but he would do it in a way that never seemed dirty. Like, he wasn't a blue comedian. And the reason was, he would kind of do it in this slightly like, it's just us. It's just us it felt like you were sitting with Alan Doyle at a pub table telling a story, as opposed to it being so that was a thing I adopted with the second show, was and the material in that second one was a lot filthier. And actually now I still feel quite surprised that I did as much dirty stuff as I did when there's 5,000 people there. Because I don't know if I would necessarily do that again. But what I basically did was make it feel a lot more like, look, it's just us. That I'm gonna share this with you. It was a bit of that. That was so. It was in smaller rooms I take it up, and then in bigger rooms I bring it down a bit.
Interesting. And did you find that was anything different? Did you find your pacing had to be different or anything like that because of the laughs sort of getting all the way to the back, or was it pretty much the same? Yeah,
I mean, that was definitely something, was learning. And again, this is something which I'd, as a kind of a student of comedy, like it's something I'd read, and it was Mickey Flanagan, who's a comedian in England who is absolutely amazing, who is one of those few comedians who was a club comic for years before coming huge. Basically, the only comedian in England who's ever been successful who other comedians are happy for. he's like the only one that every comedian doesn't resent for his, like, he did 25 years in the pubs and the clubs at the store, and then like in his 50s became an arena comedian doing 20, but yeah, basically more nights at the O2 Arena than Madonna, and no one resents his success. But I heard him do an interview talking about how when he first started playing bigger rooms, it's trying to find something to do during the laugh, because because what do you do, like pacing, and there's only so many sips of water that you can take. So that was something. But in terms of credit to the tech team that I had, SSI Audio in Moncton, who did the tech that night. The sound was so good in there that there wasn't really the delay or anything. And that was one of the things that I when I booked the arena, having been to comedy shows in big rooms where the sound wasn't great, I basically went to them. And again, there were certain things I paid for in the big LED screen. I mean, the tech alone for a gig like that costs about 20 grand, and obviously, with all of the risk, and all of the risk was solely mine. It wasn't like CBC were taking on the risk because of the documentary. It was all, it was all the film company. It was all completely, my risk. When I was negotiating with the tech company, obviously I was kind of not nickel and diming, but sensibly negotiating on different factors. But the sound was the one thing I basically said, what is the maximum I can pay? Like, what is the amount that I can pay that if one person says to me that they couldn't hear it very well, that I can basically come and steal your children? I want the guaranteed. What I basically don't want is a situation where after the gig someone tells me the sound was shit and they go, well, you knocked us down on the pricing, whatever. And I mean, as we know, it's the number one thing with stand up, you just can't scrimp on the sound. If they can't hear you, you're fucked.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a special that is exactly that. It was not an arena, but it's a big venue, and the night was great, and live it was great, sounded great, but what was captured was not what it was live. So that's very smart of you to do that.
Well, it's just it's one of those things. It's one of those things we all learn from. Where it only has to go wrong once, and then we know, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I find interesting is when you filmed it, was it just one show? I mean, you only had one chance to get it right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, just one. Yeah, so both times. So the first time, obviously, it was being filmed for the CBC doc. So the clips of it were in that. And then afterwards, I then paid the production company to edit me a special from it. And then the second time round, I basically bankrolled it myself. And yes, it was one show. So there was no, which
is amazing, because normally for most comedy specials, you would film either maybe minimum of 2, but sometimes you do like a string of 8 shows and then piece together sort of the best clips. So that's really risky to do that big for just one night, and for it to be a success is incredible.
Well, thank you. I don't know, risky or stupid, one of the two. But
it's a fine line in comedy. We're always right on that line of risk and stupidity.
That's exactly right. Exactly.
Crazy. Man. Well, I'm gonna let you go here. I know you got to go, but before you do, I first of all want to thank you again for this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. No, honestly, it has been such an honor to be on this, and it's great to finally connect with you, having heard so many wonderful things about you over the years. And as I say, I'm a big fan, so this is great. A friendship born out of a podcast moment is a beautiful thing.
Huge thank you to James Mullinger for being here today. Make sure you follow him on all social media. Check out his YouTube channel. Check out his comedy specials as well. Thank you guys for watching, for listening. We really appreciate it. And I hope to see you again next week.